Hello, people of Connecticut. I have some very special guests today, and we have some people who are going to be joining us and asking questions, and hopefully, you too will get your questions answered. I am here with Leslie and Peter Wolfgang of the Family Institute of Connecticut, and I'm going to actually let them tell you a little bit more about what they themselves do. It's really a fantastic organization. They're doing some incredible work. And I specifically asked Leslie here today because I am personally interested in the medical assistance in dying that just went through in New York. And there are, I believe, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Wolfgangs, that I think is it 13 other states in the United
Yes.
States besides
Yeah.
New York? Is that with New York or besides New York?
With New York.
With New York. And my husband has a saying is that anything that New York can do, Connecticut can do pretty soon thereafter.
Yeah.
Yeah, terrible joke, but probably accurate. So I am very concerned about the this particular program, which is generally framed as compassionate care. And I will say that when I was younger, I thought that sounded perfectly fine, and it was very much about, self-control and having a voice. And I think that that's really not what this program is about. And maybe you'd like to tell us a little bit, and there might be some other folks on this call who would like to add something to that. So let's start with
Well,
that and then kind of go into the other things all the other good work that you guys do.
well, Selena, first of all, thank you so much for having us back, for having us on your show. It's great to be here with you and with the other guests. The Family Institute of Connecticut is a pro-life, pro-family, pro-religious liberty traditional values organization that has existed in Connecticut for over 35 years. We do a lot of public education. We do some lobbying, and we are involved in the cultural conversation here in the state of Connecticut.
That's
I
so
am the executive. What's that?
that's so important because I think it really starts with the culture.
Absolutely. We're an ecumenical organization. We have people from all sorts of different denominations and churches involved in our organization. We're not we don't subscribe to any one creed, but we do support the Judeo-Christian ethics that underlie the Declaration of Independence in the Constitution of the United States. It is that heritage that undergirds the United States, especially now in our semi-quincentennial and our 250th year of our nation, that we do everything we can to support here in the state of Connecticut. So I'm the executive director. I've been the executive director for almost 20 years. My wife, Leslie, is our director of public policy. We have an office in Hartford, not far from the state capitol, just a few blocks away. We are the organization that led the fight for the traditional definition of marriage in Connecticut.
Mhm.
And we helped secure some of the strongest religious liberty protections against it in the whole country here in Connecticut. And we've done a lot of pro life work. We're one of the partners of the Connecticut March for Life, which will be held on Wednesday, March 18th, next month at the state capitol in the morning. All this stuff is available, all this information on our website, ctfamily.org. And one of the issues with which we are most involved in, Selena, is the one that you highlighted, the fight against assisted suicide. Assisted suicide is something they have been trying to pass in Connecticut since the 1990s. And the Family Institute, we have helped to defeat it every year since 2013. They have held a public hearing on this almost every year at the state capitol since 2013.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I understand that it's actually the organizations, there's multiple organizations that push this, and that it's is a global thing. This isn't just, and they're literally pushing it in other countries, and Canada is certainly an example of what it looks like, and none of that's pretty.
So, yes, unfortunately, as passed in Canada, and why any other jurisdiction in the entire world, certainly any state in the USA, would want to pass it after Canada, I have no idea because the evidence is coming at us fast and furious about what a terrible idea it is to legalize assisted suicide, how it always ends up being expanded beyond what it was originally promised to be, and how the vulnerable, the elderly, people with disabilities, how much they are at risk in a society where the right to die very often becomes a duty to die. Gee, Grandpa, you're costing us a lot of money. Wouldn't this be easier? From family members or from insurance companies? Are they going to do the right thing, or are they going to do the least expensive thing? And that's what we've seen over and over again in the states in the USA where it's legal, and in jurisdictions like Canada, just north to our border, or in places like Europe. So this has been very important to us, and it's one of the most important things to me. I've worked at Family Institute for over 20 years. I used to have Leslie's position before I became executive director. And in all the years that I've worked at FIC, one of the things of which I am most proud is our alliance with people who actually don't agree with us on much of anything else. We're the social conservatives. We're what the media would call the religious right, and we make no apologies for it. We're glad to be that group. But we have formed alliances with people on the political left, people who would identify as progressive, particularly left leaning disability rights activists. And these are people who agree with us on nothing else except assisted suicide. It is their belief, and ours, our shared belief, that assisted suicide is bad public policy that puts vulnerable populations at risk. And I have to tell you, I have fought abortion since I was a teenager. And the difference between abortion and assisted suicide is, you can't sit across a table from an unborn child and have coffee with her and listen to that unborn child say, I'm afraid if this bill becomes law, I'll be targeted. It'll be my life that they're going after. But with assisted suicide, you can actually talk to the people who are going to be the victims, and they can come up to the state capitol and they can advocate for it themselves. And that is a big part of why we have been able to defeat this for many years. We team up with people who are, some of them are paraplegic, some of them are in wheelchairs, and they come up to the state capitol. And again, these are people oftentimes with whom we have nothing else in common with. Again, like I said, we're the group that led the fight for traditional marriage. Now I'm up there at the state capitol, Leslie and I, shoulder to shoulder with people in wheelchairs with the big gay rainbow flag hanging off of their wheelchair, and it blows the minds of the legislators. They're like, "What are you two doing here together?" So I mean, it's a deep blue state, Connecticut, and what we've been able to do is keep assisted suicide out of the box that the pro-suicide people would like to put us in. This isn't simply pro-life versus pro-choice, or religious versus secular, or conservative versus liberal. This really scrambles all the categories. One year, the bill died because the deciding vote against it was cast by Senator May Flexer, who is a very, very left-wing Democrat state senator from Eastern Connecticut. She's our main nemesis whenever they're trying to put abortion and gender transitions into the state constitution. But for all that, May is someone who doesn't like assisted suicide. And there are many other people up there in both parties, particularly in the majority party, are people who don't agree with us on anything else. But even they are very uncomfortable with assisted suicide. And that's why we've been able to defeat it. Now, I want to address where we are right now at the end of February 2026, because that was part of your question too. You referenced New York State. It's true, we had a very bad year in 2025. We lost 3 states to assisted suicide. This thing had been stymied for years on the other side. They had no momentum whatsoever. They were not moving forward at all. And then, boom, all of a sudden, 2025, 3 deep blue states passed it, including New York. Well, so coming into this year in 2026, we thought we were in trouble in Connecticut. And I am here to tell you, and I have to qualify this, Selena, because the way things work at our state capitol, nothing is truly safe. You're never completely out of the woods until the stroke of midnight on the last day of the session. It's always possible, unlikely, but not impossible, that some other bill could be amended and like the assisted
Right.
suicide language could be put into that bill. But
Hmm.
I must say that's never happened. And what I can tell you right now, at the tail end of February 2026, is it looks like we have already defeated assisted suicide in Connecticut for this year.
Good.
Yeah, and that's really something because coming off of the defeats that were suffered elsewhere, including just over our border with, as you mentioned, one of the most important states in the entire country, we were not sure what that was going to mean for us. But the assisted suicide people, the Death Collective, Compassion and Choices, whatever they are, they held a press conference last week at which they really just sort of fumed at the process and openly admitted that their bill was going nowhere, that they didn't have a shot, they didn't have a chance.
Okay.
They had four legislators there, three of whom are on their way out the door, who probably won't be there next year in support of assisted suicide. So this was Representative Jonathan Steinberg, Representative Josh Elliott, who is running for governor against Lamont. Steinberg is retiring after this year, and Representative Jillian Gilchrist, who are, this is like a Star Wars bar scene of some of the most far left legislators
Okay.
in Connecticut, and all three of them are going to be gone next year. Jillian's running for Congress against John Larson. No one expects her or Elliott to win their races. Steinberg already is a failed candidate in his race for first selectman of Westport. And that was all they could muster. That and one other person was all they could muster for legislative support on assisted suicide. And to make matters worse, in order to pass assisted suicide, they need to get it through the Judiciary Committee. And when Representative Steinberg was asked a question about that, he insulted the entire committee. He called them callous for not taking up their bill. And he insulted the chairman, Steve Staffstrom, and said he found his logic underwhelming. So, I mean, if you're serious about persuading the Judiciary Committee, you don't start by calling them callous and underwhelming. I guess I'm kind of at a loss to explain why assisted suicide passed these other three states last year, because the people that are fighting for it here in Connecticut are some of the same people that are doing it in other states.
Yeah,
And
I know
I
it's
mean,
a
it was
large
really every time they have
vertical.
a press conference, it's like I'm watching an old episode of Monty Python. I don't know how these guys can punch their way out of a paper bag, but I'm happy to report. And look, I mean, I fought the abortion lobby for years. I fought the LGBT lobby for years. Leslie and I both, Family Institute, all our allied friends and other groups. And those two lobbies, and again, these lobbies overlap, so I don't really get it. But the abortion and the LGBT people, very smart, very clever. Assisted suicide is a whole different situation.
Mhm.
And, who knows what next year will hold. A lot of that will depend on the elections, but I am very happy to tell you that in all likelihood, you never say never until the session's over, but in all likelihood, we have already defeated assisted suicide in Connecticut in 2026.
That is so reassuring, Peter. It's like we could use a win.
Yeah, we
So,
got one. Yeah.
so why don't we open it up to some questions here? Anyone got anyone they'd like to, anything they'd like guys would like to throw in, or should we move on to the next? Oh, Mona.
Yes, I have a question. So Leslie, you brought up today that there's going to be a bill that's a positive for people who want parental rights. Can you share more about that and the upcoming potential hearing? Because I'm not seeing anything on the schedule. So, and I don't even know how the average person like me would figure out that it's even coming up.
Right. So yeah, Mona, for sure. There is a bill that's active now, and after I finish talking, I'll go get the number of it. But it just came out last night, and it's a bill that would require parental notification of minors before they received an abortion. So, as part of Connecticut's law, a provider would need to assess the person's age and then get their guardianship information if they're a minor, and then contact that guardian before an abortion occurs. And there will be a judicial opt-out included. It's right in the bill as well. And so that's the bill. I think it's already in the Judiciary Committee. That's where it's sitting right now. And according to some of our sources, it should come up for a public hearing as early as next week. And I'll have more detailed information about that tomorrow. And so hopefully, you'll get an email from FIC, and I'll post in on Facebook and elsewhere that there will be a hearing very soon, and people should start signing up right away to testify and to submit their written testimony. So this is great news for Connecticut, great news for the pro-lifers in Connecticut. This is something that we've wanted for a long time. So yes, that's coming up very soon, very quickly.
Great. Yeah, it is very exciting. Last year when we were getting hammered with so many of the anti-parenting bills, it just blows my mind. Our children can't get Tylenol
Yep.
at the schools, but they can get an abortion. And I don't think that parents really realize that in this state, we have had no control over decisions other people can make for our children without our knowledge. It's crazy. So I really hope this covers not just abortion, but everything, that parents will be involved with any decision that anybody outside of their family would make.
Yeah, this is the fruit. I noted on FIC's blog, this is the fruit of last year's amendment vote proposed by, I think it was Gail Mastrofrancesco, Representative Mastrofrancesco, proposed an amendment to another bill, an abortion bill, where parents would be notified of a minor's abortion. And that was voted down. But during the discussion on the floor, people noted that there hadn't even been a discussion in committee, like there was no public hearing on the bill. So how could they possibly be voting on this parental notification bill? So some of our allies took the initiative and followed up with the leadership within the Democrats and said, hey, you guys said that some people wanted to learn more, and so we should have a public hearing. And so, it's a short season this year up at the legislature. So any bills had to flow through committee. So there was a letter written by Representative Lanu to the Judiciary Committee or to leadership asking for this bill and for there to be a public hearing. And we're able to get it. I'm totally shocked and surprised and feel wonderful about it. But yeah, we're going to have a hearing very soon.
Great. That is so great. Thank you.
If you get us the bill number, I can put it in the show notes.
Yeah, thank you.
Oh. Anyone else got anything they'd like to ask? Because we can, I've got other things I can just move us on to. So, what's the, okay, so do you know what the current state of transition, I'm doing this in air quotes for anyone who's just listening, for in Connecticut right now? Because we have a federal level executive order that doctors are not supposed to be doing this anymore. Do we know what's actually happening in Connecticut, or is that just all a big fog?
So the good news is that the culture has swung very strongly in our direction for the last 2 or 3 years now.
Mhm.
And that helped bring President Trump back into power. And that also had a
Oh no.
resistance of the Democratic Party. And just to give you for instance, Yale Medical School, what is it? Yale University, what, Leslie? Their health center or something. But Yale, where they were doing these gender transitions, and the Connecticut Children's Hospital,
Mhm.
both of these two medical entities in Connecticut have said they will no longer do gender transitions for minors, and that has driven the power structure, our ruling class in the state of Connecticut, absolutely mad. But there's nothing they can do about it.
Mhm.
And on top of that, there was a lawsuit was won for the first time by a detransitioner elsewhere in the country. It did not happen in Connecticut. But why this is so important for us in Connecticut is that the politicians control the executive and legislative branches of the government, they don't control juries.
Mhm.
And the fact that the public has moved against this, that there was a detransitioner that won somewhere in the neighborhood of a $2 million judgment against the doctors, means that we're on the verge of seeing a really big shift on this issue. That regardless of the resistance of far left politicians, they are not going to be able to control this. I think we're at a moment where the dam is breaking. Now, that being said, has any of this pierced the consciousness of the Democratic Party? Apparently not. They're like full speed ahead. Once in a great while, you'll hear a comment from, I don't know, Gavin Newsom on his podcast or something out in California, but it never lasts very long. And here in Connecticut, I cannot point to a parallel to that. I cannot name a single Democrat politician in Connecticut who has publicly voiced hesitation over this and said, "Gee, maybe our party shouldn't be doing this." I'm not aware of a single one.
Mm, yeah.
But I think this is going to shift with or without him. That's my sense. I don't know if Leslie wants to add more.
What was the question? Are there any gender bills?
Well, she wanted to know the state of the trans issue here in Connecticut.
Yeah, that's basically it. I mean, I'm trying to monitor. There's an interesting case within the Commission on Human Rights where some former patients have filed a complaint against Hartford Healthcare for their pausing of gender surgeries and closing down their gender center, the pediatric gender center. So, I mean, I'm interested to see how that complaint resolves itself because that could influence whether or not the hospitals pick it back up in Connecticut. But we already have across the country many other hospitals defying their attorney generals and state laws that permit gender affirming care, where those hospitals are shutting down their gender clinics and no longer doing surgeries or prescribing hormones and puberty blockers to minors. Of course, the included in gender affirming care, which is what they call it, all those treatments fall under gender affirming care. Also included there is mental health help, right? Which absolutely should continue. These children do need care for their mental health. So I think a lot of times what's happening is when a hospital is saying, well, we're continuing some gender affirming care treatment, they're actually just talking about the mental health treatment. But anyways, in Connecticut, I wanted to touch on it. I just got my list. There is a bill. So let me just step back. The abortion bill, the parental notification bill, is House Bill 5309. And then yesterday there was a hearing on SB 227, which is a law that Connecticut has. It's modifying a law that Connecticut has. It's called the Shield Laws. And that's where should an unfortunate person from another state who received, let's say, a double mastectomy as a minor here in Connecticut, and they come to regret it and would like to sue the providers in our state, even though they live in another state, we have lots of laws that throw up hurdles and extra procedures and analysis and retribution should their case fail against those poor people seeking to sue providers here in Connecticut. So those are shield laws, and they're extra protections for providers who do gender affirming care. But there's a bill in the General Law Committee right now, and they had a hearing yesterday that would expand that to include federal authorities who are trying to seek information about surgeons or other doctors providing those gender affirming care treatments in Connecticut. And also, it also expands the class of actions that would be thwarted through this. And actually what it also does as well is it prevents our pharmacy board in the state of Connecticut that licenses providers and another board from taking into consideration when it comes to licensing in Connecticut, whether those providers have broken the law in other states. with regard to gender treatment. So let's say a provider comes to Connecticut, they want to be licensed here. I want to do business here in Connecticut, and they have committed crimes in other states with regard to gender affirming care. Let's say they broke a law that banned it. Our state would not be able to consider that when determining whether or not to permit that person to practice in our state. So normally, a doctor that breaks a law in another state, our board, before they'll allow those doctors to practice in Connecticut, will say, gee, you broke the law in the other state. What was going on? You shouldn't have done that. We don't like providers practicing in Connecticut who broke laws in other states. This bill and these series of laws protects those providers and prevents our licensing entities from taking into consideration laws that were broken around gender affirming care and abortion. So this is trying to protect doctors who mail abortion inducing drugs into other states from Connecticut, so that when somebody is hurt in another state, or if let's say they have a ban in another state from doing that, and that attorney general tries to ask questions or prosecute a provider in Connecticut for doing that, again, Connecticut will shield them. They're called shield laws. So again, this year, and as in years in the past, Connecticut is trying to protect doctors at consumers' expense. And we're looking for other bills that will come up this year, but that's kind of the exciting prospects on gender here in Connecticut. And so, there'll be some other opportunities to testify and submit written testimony against these gender expansion bills. And of course, there's still with the schools as well. Connecticut Family Institute in Connecticut is heavily involved with a Title IX complaint against the city of Waterbury and other schools within the Naugatuck Valley League on behalf of girls who were forced to compete against a boy in the Naugatuck Valley League volleyball teams, and also on track and field. So I had to do a little analysis for some legislators, because we have some bills maybe offered requested that have to do with school sports and transgender kids. And in the past 10 years for the CIAC championships, there's several times that for the state championships, a girl was displaced by a boy athlete competing as a girl. And so, and there's hundreds of instances of individual races where girls were displaced by a boy athlete. And so we've got a real problem in Connecticut. So I do hope that at some point we'll get a hearing directly on the topic and have some legislation. We do have a vote on it from last year that will be touting this summer. But that's kind of the status of where we're at in Connecticut, just kind of slinging it out in each school district, even though we have new federal initiatives to rein in a lot of the gender materials that are reaching our kids, and to rein in some of the abuses. But in Connecticut, in our districts and within our boards of education and the state board of education, they just kind of play hide the ball, I feel like, and just stay quiet and as low as possible and try and ride it out until there's a new administration. Other states, they seem to wear it on their chin, right? But here it's it seems like on this issue in Connecticut, they're receiving advice to just stay quiet and stay low. And
So you don't, so other than Waterbury, like the Naugatuck Valley volleyball thing, which I had heard something about, so you think there might be other cases or and they're just being low key, or, do you have any sense of what's happening elsewhere?
I think that there's other cases, but parents need to step up and be willing to file a complaint with the federal government. The Office of Civil Rights for the Department of Education provides a form, and they make it quite easy to
Is that something you could
file
find
a
on their
complaint.
website?
Yeah, totally. And it's also on my website, on the Family Institute website, ctfamily.org. If you do Title IX, I've included the forms there because we really do need other parents to step up and file complaints. And this administration is not being super picky about, did you witness it yourself? Is it your child involved?
Mhm.
They're really interpreting the Title IX rules liberally, so that if you're aware of it, and this is the standard that it really should be, if you're aware of Title IX being violated, then you can file a report, include your evidence, and file a complaint, and then they will take a look at it. And so in the one for Waterbury, like, I provided them with a lot of backup documentation as much as I had. And once the Office of Civil Rights takes a look at it, if they think that there's something there, it becomes the responsibility of the school to do the investigation and to report back to the Office of Civil Rights what evidence they have about the Title IX incident. So you don't have to have all the facts. You have to be aware that something is wrong here. And this is the information I have. And so please, Office of Civil Rights, take a closer look. So you don't have to be a parent directly involved. Of course, the closer you are to the actual incident, the better. But if you're a member of the community and you're aware of what's going on, I did see something in the news about North Stonington. I think there's something brewing there. And there are other towns where this is happening, but we just need people to step up. I can't file all the complaints in Connecticut. I mean, maybe I could, but I
Well, you'd
prefer
have
not
to
to.
know about them first, and you're not psychic. So,
That's true. If I had more facts, I would be able to do it for sure. But I would need to know about it. That's true.
does anybody have any questions?
So I see that Pam is on the line. Maybe Pam can talk a little bit about what's
Home-
happening on homeschooling. Connecticut, Family Institute of
I'd love
Connecticut,
to hear about some
very
homeschooling.
involved on it.
So,
But we're in support mode a lot of the time to the larger organizations in Connecticut that are working on homeschooling. So I'd love to hear from Pam and what's going on.
Hi, thanks, Leslie. And it's always a pleasure to work with Family Institute. And I want to thank Selena for letting me sit in. I work with Teach CT, the Education Association of Christian Homeschoolers of Connecticut. You can understand why we've shortened that to Teach CT. So as the Wolfgangs know, there's a push to regulate homeschooling using the hidden abuse narrative. And the push is expanding across the US and the globe, with a bill being proposed in the UK, specifically using the same abuse narrative. And it's no accident that it comes so close in time with the published report by UNESCO outlining its goal to bring homeschoolers under regulation, to bring everyone into alignment with UN Agenda 2030. A primary homeschooling opponent, the Coalition for Responsible Home Education, that had been a smaller group initially back in 2013, we say CRHE for short, worked with UNESCO on that report, and they've been working with Connecticut agency heads as far back as 2018. The last time there was a push to regulate Connecticut homeschoolers. Back in 2018, we had a forum in the spring. So there was no legislation that came that year, but there was a language in the governor's budget bill on education in 2019 to regulate us. And the CRHE representative sent out an email that morning. And it was Peter who showed me that as we were standing on the Capitol steps, saying she had signed an email along with Sarah Egan, the then acting OCA, Office of Child Advocate, urging all of the legislators to vote for homeschool regulation. Fortunately, that bill did not pass that year. So they've been working with Connecticut agency heads. That was Sarah Egan, who is still in the limelight because she just went to a different organization, supposedly a nonprofit. But if you follow the media reports, you'll see that often Sarah Egan is interviewed more frequently than the actual agency head, Christina Gio, who took her place regarding drafting legislation. So back in 2019, the pattern was when we came into the forum, the day that we walked in, the media was reporting on a report by the Child Advocate's Office citing a number of homeschool families who had had contact with DCF. All of these, you hear me in my tone of voice doing the exclamation. I'm sorry,
Air quotes.
the air quotes, yeah. So it was contact with DCF, and that's important because there's a difference between having contact, meaning having someone possibly anonymously make a report to DCF, versus actually having those accusations substantiated. So the more important number is substantiated cases, and those are the numbers we never see coming out of OCA. So the report was followed no research requirements. It included a bunch of cherry-picked cases from 6 cherry-picked towns at the time. So in 2025, Egan's successor did the same thing. We had a spring forum that was not a public hearing. She published a similar report using similar cherry-picked stories. Once again, not differentiating between reports and substantiated cases to build a narrative to push homeschooling. At that forum, Teach CT was initially slated, we thought, to speak as a guest speaker. And we learned the day before, or the weekend before the forum, that we had been replaced on the agenda by, how about that? A representative of CRHE. That's the anti-homeschooling group. So that forum was held after the public hearing deadline, and legislators, in answer to very specific questions about any proposals, denied any plans. No, we're not. We don't have a bill language or anything like that. We just wanted to hear from you.
Right.
So, however, a FOIA request revealed that legislative leaders, agency heads, and the governor's office had been working on a draft of bill language from the beginning of March of 2025. It was within a week of the media stories coming out about the man who'd been held captive in Waterbury, setting fire to his house.
Never let a good crisis go to waste.
Oh, absolutely. And then
They're in continuous crisis in Connecticut, apparently.
There was the tragic story of Mimi Torres Rodriguez being killed by her parents. They claim that she was homeschooled, withdrawn to homeschool, but she was not homeschooled. And then DCF felt very embarrassed, I believe, when it was revealed that a DCF employee had done a welfare check-in by phone call, similar to what we're doing, and a young adult stood in her place to pretend to be Mimi. Well, she did that because Mimi was already dead. So we know they have plans. We've seen the language that they were working on last year. This year, we've been watching for a bill, and last week the Ed Committee voted to raise as a concept an act concerning equivalent instruction. That's it. That's all we know. Once again, the chairperson denied knowing specifics about what the bill language would be. She did confirm that it would apply to both private and homeschool families. And today's Connecticut Mirror published an article regarding plans for an emergency cert bill, including education issues. So we don't really know where that language might land. We don't have a bill number for the concept that was raised in education last week. We don't have full language for an emergency cert bill. That wouldn't go through public hearing. Last year, there were approximately 4,000 homeschooling families who came to the Capitol for the May Forum. So if we get to a hearing with a specific bill, we're hoping for the same turnout that we had last year, because that's what it will take to get them to listen, if they listen at all. So that's my summation of where we're at right now. And the fact that the legislators wanted to include private education, they just don't care who they go after right now.
Well, I think it's in their best interest to make sure that it's as uncomfortable to do homeschooling as possible. That certainly is what it looks like to me.
Yeah.
Um, so I know a lot of people do homeschooling, because of the vaccination issue. And
Yes.
so now they're trying to include vaccines for homeschooling. And I wondered if you had any thoughts on that.
Well, I don't believe that the bill specifies homeschooling. They had not done that. They were talking about changing the vaccine laws that could potentially include vaccination for adults, mandated vaccines for adults.
Mhm.
They would be withdrawing from the usual agency that mandates, or rather that advises on childhood vaccines. So they're going to have their own commissar one person making decisions on what should be on that schedule. And yes, those who left public schools because we lost the religious exemption are especially concerned. They're also talking about removing the Religious Freedom Act so that there would be no chance for people to claim a religious exemption of any kind. Peter mentioned something about, if New York can do it, Connecticut is next. I always think of Connecticut as the beta test for any bad,
Big
any
time.
bad bill, any bad policy concept they want to try.
Yeah, indeed. And I think I'm glad you touched on that, Pam, because it connects with, it touches on a law in Connecticut, which they plan to amend in order to get at vaccines, called RFRA.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
And I think that's the Religious
Yep.
Freedom Restoration.
Restoration Act.
Yeah.
It was a bill passed in the 90s, which mandates that if the state is going to impose its will on a religious person or organization, it has to have a really excellent reason. And so they're going to, the rumblings are, and we don't have bill language yet, we've heard that, or we've seen that they're going to try and amend RFRA in order to get at the folks who, because of religious reasons, do not want to take vaccines. And so they're going to try, and they're doing this because it looks like some folks might win in the courts in order to use their religious exemption to avoid the vaccines. And, heaven forbid they win in court. And so the state is going to try and pass a law attacking them. And this is very important. And all Connecticut churches and people with religious values should take note that if they're willing to change the law to get at people who don't want to vaccinate, in order to force them to do their will, then they will change the law protecting religions for anything. And we need to be very strong against the legislature and stand up for RFRA. And so if you have a pastor, I have a blog post about it. If you have a pastor, if you have religious friends, we should be talking to them and alerting them that this bill, that they're considering amending this bill in order to achieve a political ends. And people of faith should not stand up for that at all. And we should be looking out for our friends who don't want to vaccinate, who for very serious, strong beliefs, religious beliefs, they don't want to vaccinate. We should be standing up for them because, as the saying goes, the next time around, they could be coming for the rest of us. Anything politically incorrect that we're doing based on our deeply held and religious beliefs, they could be editing the law so that we don't have our religious protections under RFRA. Of course, we'll still have our constitutional protections guaranteed by the U.S. Constitution, but these are local enhanced protections for Connecticut citizens. Because our legislators valued religious liberty so much, they passed enhanced laws in Connecticut protecting the rights of believers. That's not something that we should give up easily.
So how does that work with them eliminating the religious exemption? Because that certainly sounds like it's contradictory.
So I haven't looked at the case, but somehow there's a connection between, okay, so in the case that's I forget which court it's in the Connecticut courts, they're relying on Connecticut law, this RFRA, in order to not to have to take the vaccine either for themselves or their children. It's probably for their children. We're talking about vaccination of minors. And so they filed a lawsuit a couple of years ago, and issue by issue, they've had the judges have taken away their arguments as far as not wanting to vaccinate their kids. And the last argument that they have left is this religious RFRA protection, which says you can't make me violate my religious beliefs unless the state has a super really good reason. Mm-hmm. And so there's on the record of when they eliminated the vaccine exemption, there was a lot of talk, which wasn't very scientific, which, they didn't have, there was a lot of competing arguments, and maybe they didn't have the really excellent arguments that they should have in order to take away these strongly held beliefs against being vaccinated. So this case is alive, and it's going to be put in jeopardy if they change the RFRA law so that it doesn't apply specifically to vaccines. So I'm explaining it really poorly, but basically the takeaway is we need to protect RFRA. We need to be aware of it. We need to talk to our legislators about it and our pastors to say, this law is in jeopardy. And we want to stand up at this moment in this session for people who maybe, they're politically incorrect when the rest of Connecticut looks at them like they don't understand. Why don't you want to vaccinate? But we need to stand up for them because they have these strongly held beliefs and they're trying to protect their rights not to have that infringed. So we do have a blog post up about it, and we're going to be watching this bill very closely. It's another one of those concept bills where they don't have the language yet. But it also connects with something that I'm working on with the barrels. And I see that Tom's on, and I was hoping that he'd be able to talk about his initiative to encourage more churches to be politically involved in Connecticut.
You're muted. You got to unmute.
If they're willing, I'm kind of catching them.
There we go. There we go.
There we go.
No, yeah.
No, we had the link on our phone, so we just used the phone. We didn't use the computer. So
before I start, what's RFRA stand for? What's that's an
Religious Freedom Restoration Act. It was on the federal level. It was passed by Bill Clinton in the 93 when he still had a Democrat Congress. And we have a state RFRA since the 90s as well.
Okay.
And that's what we're talking about is the state one.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, we're going full steam ahead on finding all the churches in the districts that seem winnable in Connecticut. And we have a spreadsheet, and we're putting them all down. We have volunteers that are willing to call them to get all the data to find out, if we can present something to them to gain voter registration, and we're inviting the pastors to to an education symposium, and so it's still all in the works, but we're going. It seems to be coming together. God seems to be blessing it so far, and so we'll see how it works out in the next few weeks. And
but what we found is that in doing our information collecting or whatever, that a lot of these towns only lost by a couple hundred votes. So it wasn't like
Districts.
or districts or whatever lost. And so it's not like we have to do a real big, like we need 10,000 to win. It really isn't that much. So if we get the churches to vote, we may turn a lot of these districts.
And what we're finding out too is, like, from the pastors that I've been talking to, they really don't know what's going on. They don't know about the state trying to promote full-term abortion. They don't know about boys and girls sports, that it's really happening. They don't know about the promotion of gender ideology. It's amazing to me how, they watch the national news, but they don't realize what's going on in Hartford, that all this nefarious activity.
Reporting out of Connecticut is terrible. That's,
yeah.
That's why we've been doing the podcast.
There's no news media here.
There's no news media really
Right.
here.
So it's really, we're doing an education campaign too, to the churches. So that's basically how it's going so far.
I'd like to, if I can, I'd like to plug Tom and Debbie's organization, the Institute of Connecticut History. Do you guys have a website?
No, we don't. No, we had one years ago, and it was just too much work, to tell you the truth. So we just we do have an email, and they can contact us. You know what I mean? We do history talks about Connecticut, and we the founding of Connecticut was such a Christian founding, and it's a shame that God has lost Connecticut.
Yeah, I want to say something about that, about the importance of the Barrel's work. And, anyone who is watching the Zoom call, contact Selena or contact FIC. You guys, everyone should be on the Barrel's email list. The Institute of Connecticut History, what Debbie just said, I'll put it to you this way. And this is something that all of us on this call, all the different groups represented, have in common. Mona is the Connecticut representative for a group called Intercessors for America. And that is, there's no single religious entity, I think, in the USA that is closer to President Trump and the Trump administration than Mona's group, than Intercessors for America. Pam mentioned Teach Connecticut. Well, Teach Connecticut, it is probably the biggest homeschooling group in the state of Connecticut, and it is specifically rooted in evangelical Christianity. So you have Mona's Intercessors for America. You have Teach Connecticut, which is, I don't think it's a coincidence that even here in Blue State, Connecticut, that the biggest homeschooling group is an evangelical Christian group. And then you've got the Family Institute of Connecticut. We're loosely affiliated with Focus on the Family. Like I said, we're the religious right. And then you've got the Institute of Connecticut History. And what I want to say to anyone watching this, if you happen to see, and if you didn't, look for it on YouTube. I think it is the single most important speech given by an American politician in decades. But Secretary of State Marco Rubio's speech in Munich, Germany, to NATO, where he tied together, and we've not heard anyone, I don't think we've heard any American politician speak this way, certainly not in my adult lifetime, maybe not in my lifetime at all, but the connections he drew that tie America and Europe together in our shared common history, going back centuries, going back millennia. And it was such a relief to Europe, and it's a pleasant surprise that Europe found it a relief, because this is something that Europe, at the behest of bad American leadership going back decades, unfortunately, we've been focused on, as if our victory in the Cold War was only about commerce, and if we just had free trade and globalism, then the world will be, at peace. Without in that ignored the Christian roots of our civilization, and that there is something special and unique and frankly, in many ways superior about our Christian civilization vis-a-vis other civilizations. And the interesting thing about the Barrels, what Rubio was doing for the West writ large, the Barrels do for the state of Connecticut. The state of Connecticut is rooted in its Christian origins. And the more you get away from that, the more you don't know who those preachers are, whose statues are carved on the outside of our state capitol, the more you fall into this sort of darkness that we're talking about. That's what ties all this together. The attack on parenting, the attack on homeschooling, the attack on the most basic truths of reality, male and female, he created them, the attacks on the unborn child. We see this in scripture that, when God's chosen people, when they stray from the covenant that he made with them, then they fall into darkness and they get conquered. They decline and fall. And that's Connecticut. That's where we are right now. Unless we get back to the sort of things that the Barrels are trying to educate all of us on, I think that's at the root of everything. And I hope you don't mind my giving you that plug and hogging some time, but I really wanted
Thank
to
you.
tie all that together.
Yeah, there's such a good reason why we're called the Constitution State. And if people knew Connecticut's legacy, they would be amazed that it's worth fighting for.
It
Uh,
is. It
I
is.
just wanted to mention that it's interesting to hear Peter reference the Christian's background. And I don't know if the Barrels are familiar with the history of 10184, which is the governing statute on education in Connecticut. But its first sentence stems from a statute from 1650 and grants the I'm sorry, I'm trying to find the actual language. Shame on me for not memorizing. Grants the duty of teaching children to the parents.
Yeah.
And it is so painful for the state to acknowledge this. They go out of their way, just like they did in the education committee last week, to not quote it. They will. The LCO representative who was there in the committee was asked questions about the current state of the law, and he would not quote it. It states all parents and those who have the care of children shall bring them up in some lawful and honest employment and instruct them or cause them to be instructed in reading, writing, etc., including a study of town, state, and federal government. So all parents, the first duty of instruction is to the parents, and that language comes from a 1650 statute. And they will work very hard not to say that. So it was interesting to the most the LCO would do last week was to say, oh, there's a list of subjects in that sentence. And I'm sorry to correct Peter. I would love it if it were true. About the size of Teach CT, we have about 2,000 people on our email list, and our more recent Facebook groups are going. There is another state organization that we've been working with, Connecticut Homeschool Network.
That's right.
That has a much larger following on Facebook. They don't do memberships. There's probably some crossover between the two groups. So we are not large, but we are the Christian-based organization in Connecticut. Thanks, Peter.
And I want to share with you all that Intercessors for America does have a huge project going on right now. It's a grassroots project, and all that history that Tom and Debbie have, I want them to plug it in to the website that's already been created. It's called Rededicate America, and we as Connecticut citizens can put in all of our heritage into this website. They are tracking it. It's going to be an interactive map that's going to go up at the Museum of the Bible. And it's a grassroots effort. So we put in the information. There's some information that's already plugged in there, but this is an opportunity for us to recount all of the historical works of God in the state of Connecticut, reclaim that history, and rededicate our land to the Lord. And that's our project for 2026 in this 250th anniversary year. We're going to be celebrating at the Museum of the Bible over July 3rd and 4th. And this project is live now. So you can just go to Rededicate America. You can set up your information and plug it in there. So that way the Barrels don't have to create another website. They can take that vast amount of history and plug it in there so all the rest of us can see it, and they get to put their name on there too. So everybody will know where this history is coming from. So we thank you for tracking all this history, and we really hope that you'll plug it in there because we do want to see it and be able to use that history as we intercessors go out and rededicate this this land and pray over this land, which is one of the things that we're working on right now with different groups throughout our state, prayer walking all over our state of Connecticut. And we've been doing it for years. We pray at the Capitol. We do a lot of praying, but we believe this war is spiritual first and foremost, and we are just laying the groundwork. 2025 was about praying for the state to flip from death to life and see that shift in the, getting away from a completely immoral place that's willing to kill babies. And that's what we had. And so, we're looking at the fruits of that. We hope that not having this legislation for assisted suicide this year is part of the fruits, and we hope we'll see more fruits. I mean, unfortunately, we do see Planned Parenthood continues to get money, and it's probably because as these hospitals are stopping their trans programs, Planned Parenthood is picking them up. So, we've got to keep educating taxpayers where their money's going to, because most people we know don't want their money going towards death. They want it going to life.
This could also be, that money could also be, I mean, we know there's a lot of money laundering going on as well. And we
Yeah.
see that in Minnesota, so this could be an aspect of that. So hopefully it's not, honestly, I'd rather it was money laundering than that they were transing people. But that's me. Um, so we're getting towards the end here. Is there anybody who'd like to ask some more questions before we sign off? Are we good? Are we there? Is there anything Leslie and Peter would like to add?
Well, I see she hasn't spoken, but I see Lords Delgado on this call as well. I also want to give a shout out to the National Hispanic Clergy Leadership Conference, which I know Lourdes is involved with, like Intercessors of America. That is a group that reaches all the way up to the West Wing of the White House, and they have been incredibly helpful to us here in the state of Connecticut, and we love those guys too.
So if everyone here would maybe drop emails and any contact information you'd like to have on the show notes, just drop them just drop them right in there, and I'll make sure they end up in the show notes. It's really been fantastic to meet everybody, and maybe some of you will be able to come back and be on the podcast one-on-one. I'd really like that.
Thanks for having us, Selena.
My pleasure, my absolute pleasure. I always love you guys. So. All right.
Great.
So, people of Connecticut, we hope you've enjoyed this, and we'll come back again. And God bless Connecticut, and God bless America. And let's all let's all pray for the best, because that's what we need. All right.
Thank you, Selena.
Amen.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you.